Hello and welcome everyone. I'm so glad you are all here. So like Misty said, my name is Courtney and I am the education specialist here at the Henry Vilas Zoo. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about the zoo, and then what we're going to do today on our behind the scenes tour. I have been working here since about 2017, and I'm an educator here at the zoo. So I get to work with the most dangerous animals at the zoo, which are the children and the people. And I get to talk to them and teach them all about animals and how special and important they are. So that's what we're going to do a little bit today. A little bit about the zoo before we get started. So Henry Vilas Zoo here in Madison, Wisconsin has been around since 1911. So we're over 100 years old. So we're a pretty old zoo. And as you can probably imagine, the zoo has changed a lot in those 100 plus years. We were founded by William and Anna Vilas in 1911, and they donated the land and named it in honor of their son, Henry, who passed away at a young age. So that's where we get our name, Henry Vilas. And as part of the deed of the land of the Henry Vilas Zoo, they said that the zoo should remain free and open to the public. And so we still follow that to this day. It's part of our zoo, and part of what we do is we are a free zoo, so anyone and everyone can come to the zoo and have a great time and see some animals and enjoy it. So our zoo is open, so if you want to come in person, you are more than welcome to come head to the Henry Vilas Zoo. We are free and open every day from 9:30 to 5 o'clock. So be sure to put that on your summer agenda to have a fun visit at the zoo. Another really important thing about the Henry Vilas Zoo is that we are an AZA accredited zoo. So this means we are accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. That means we meet the highest standard in animal care and animal welfare. Less than 10% of animal institutions in the United States are AZA accredited. So that means Henry Vilas Zoo is one of the best zoos in the country. So we get to take a sneak peek today at one of the best zoos in the country, which is so awesome. And it also means that we meet really high standards in animal care. And that's something that's really important, right? We want to make sure our animals are really, really well taken care of. And you'll know that it's not just me saying that we're doing a good job. There's actually a big organization that checks up on what we're doing to make sure we meet those standards and make sure that we continue to be a really good zoo who takes really good care of their animals. So I think that's really important to know walking into a tour to figure out, what's this zoo about? What are we interested in? And we are really interested in being a conservation organization who takes just exceptional care of their animals. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take a little tour to a couple different spots at our zoo. I wish I could show you the entire zoo and see all of your favorite animals, but we just don't have time to do that today. So what we're going to do is right behind me, I am at the Animal Health Center. So we're going to peek in there, head into the Animal Health Center, learn a little bit about what our vets do here at the zoo, and see some cute little critters who live in there. Then we're going to walk over to our seals, and we're going to take a look at our seals on their exhibit space. Then we're going to go behind the scenes, and we're going to take a look at the freezer where we keep all the food for the animals. We're going to take a look at the pump room and learn a little bit about how we clean the water and make sure everything is really safe for the animals. And then we're going to look in the kitchen and learn about what zookeepers do day to day to take care of the seals. And then at the very end, we're going to meet Keeper Kristen, and she is going to let us get a little bit up close to the seals and learn a little bit about how she takes care of them every day, and hopefully do a little bit of a training session for them. So it's important to know that all of our animals, they have choices. So just like how you guys probably don't like getting forced to do stuff, right? That's not very fun when you're forced. You like to have the choice. And we give all of our animals choices here at the zoo. So I can't guarantee any animal will come up close to me, but we're going to have some of their favorite food. So it's a pretty good chance that they'll probably want to come up close, but it's totally their choice. I can't force them to do anything, and neither can Keeper Kristen. So that's good to know too as we go on our tour and as we see some different animals that they have the choice to come over or not. All right, so that is what we're going to do today. Sounds pretty fun. So I'm going to flip my camera around, and we're going to walk into our Animal Health Center and learn a little bit about what the vets do here at the zoo.
Hey, Courtney, we have our first question.
Awesome.
The first question is, do you love animals, and what is your favorite animal?
Oh my goodness, that's an amazing question. I absolutely love animals. They are my favorite, and that is why I have this job, because I love animals. And I have a couple different favorites. It kind of changes day to day because I do get to work with a lot of cool animals. My favorite here at the zoo is our rhino, Harmon. He's a big sweetheart. I love working with him. But I have so many favorite animals because I get to see so many cool animals every day. All right, friends. So here we are. We are peeking through into our animal health center. So in this, we can see through the window here, kind of a lot of things are going on. So the first thing I wanted to point out to you, this is our treatment area. So you can see this table here and this big table here. So that's the space where the animal will usually be if they're getting any sort of treatment. Now, generally, when the animals come into this building, a lot of them actually aren't sick. So generally what we do is called preventative care. So how many of you guys have probably been to the doctor even when you're feeling totally healthy, right? We get checkups. We have preventative care too. And they just want to see how you're growing, see how you're doing. So we do that with all of our animals, and every single one of our animals gets an annual exam. And we have a lot of different animals here at the zoo. We have over 1,000 individuals if you count up every last little critter. So it takes a while for us to get through all those annual exams. So every single time our vets are in, they're doing those annual exams on our animals. And generally that's going to happen right here in this room. Now you can imagine that I don't know if Eddie or Giraffe can fit through this door right here, right? Well, he'd really have to crouch down. He probably won't fit. So everything in this room that we would need for animal procedure is portable. We can take it to the animals. And that's really great for those really large animals like Eddie or Giraffe or Harmon the rhino, as well as our dangerous animals. So like our grizzly bears or our big cats, it can be a little bit trickier to move them from the spaces that they're used to being in. So we can actually take a lot of this equipment out into the zoo. So something you'll see right here, this is an ultrasound machine. And as you've probably seen from human care, ultrasounds are usually to check to see if there's a baby. And so we use this for our animals to see if they're pregnant. We can also check to see a lot of their organs, make sure that they're really healthy and everything's functioning really well. So fun fact about this ultrasound machine, we can take this out into the zoo, and we have actually trained our red panda, our female red panda, to be prepared for an ultrasound, because we're hoping that maybe one day our red pandas will have babies. They're an endangered animal. So we're part of a species survival plan, which I'll talk about in a little bit, to help their species and help them because they are endangered. So we're hopeful that we might have a baby red panda here at our zoo. But to prepare for that, we teach our female to be ready for an ultrasound. So when she does an ultrasound, we don't have to sedate her or put her to sleep. And she knows it's not scary because she does it all the time. So what she'll do is she'll actually put her paws up on a little PVC pipe, and her keepers give her her favorite treat, which is usually blueberries or grapes. And then the keepers will practice with her with just a spoon. And she knows that when she puts her paws up on that bar and someone's touching her belly, that it's no big deal. And she gets her favorite treats. So when the vets need to come in and need to do this ultrasound behavior, she knows, oh, it's no big deal. I do that every single day. And she gets her treats and everything's awesome. So that's what we use the ultrasound machine for. And just a great example of what we call husbandry care we do for our animals. A lot of our animals get practice with their veterinary care every single day. And we'll see that a little bit when we meet the seals. Another thing you can see in here is we have our pharmacy. So animals need medicine just like you and I do. And the medicine is a lot of similar things that we might have to take. So maybe if you've had a headache before, you might have taken some Motrin or some things that might make that pain go away. Or maybe you've gotten sick before and you've had to take an antibiotic to help clear up that sickness. A lot of those similar things will happen with our animals. So we need to give them kind of similar medicine. And so we have anti-inflammatories, and which helps, if their muscles are hurting or something like that. We have antibiotics, all of those good things. But we have to have it in a lot of different sizes because there are so many different types of animals. So thinking about our tiniest little birds in the aviary all the way up to Eddie or Giraffe, we need to have something ready for all of those different sized animals. So what you see in that cabinet is a lot of the same thing, but in many, many, many different shapes and sizes. So that's one of the tricky parts of being a veterinarian and working at the zoo, is that we have so many different shaped and sized animals. So a lot of the things you're just going to see in here are a lot of the same things, but in a lot of different shapes and sizes. Now, this room right here, this is our surgery room, and this room is always ready to go. So even though there's no surgeries planned for today or anytime soon, we are always ready for a surgery. So if there's an emergency with an animal, our vets are ready to rush in and do what they need to do to make sure that animal is safe and healthy. So that's our surgery room where we would perform surgery on our animals. And then right here, This room right here is our radiology room. That's where we take x-rays of the animals so we can see inside them and look at their bones and again, make sure that they're healthy and that everything's looking good for them. So there's so much that goes on here in the Animal Health Center. And there's even more kind of behind the scenes that we won't be able to take a look at because that's where we have our quarantine. I used to have to explain what quarantine meant, but now everybody knows what quarantine is. It's where you kind of take a break from other animals or other people to make sure you're not passing on any sickness. So quarantine is behind us here. We're not going to see that because, again, we don't go back there unless we're taking care of those animals. That quarantine space is a space where usually it's animals when they're first coming to the zoo or leaving the zoo, and they're making sure that they're really healthy. Now here you can see one of our zoo managers, Joanna. She's getting some materials that she needs to be able to take care of the animals who are in quarantine. So we have a lot of different people that work in this space. We have our veterinarians. So those are kind of like animal doctors. And our veterinarians come from the UW Veterinary School. And we also have a vet tech. His name is Mark. He works here at the zoo, and he's here Monday through Friday. He's kind of like a nurse for the animals. But then we have a lot of other different people that work in this space and help take care of the critters who live in here. So we're actually going to see some critters who live in here. Right here we can see, right up top there, these are my friends Pinky and Sage. And they are golden lion tamarins. So these guys are a species of monkey. And these guys are native to southeastern Brazil. And these guys actually have a really interesting story. So not too long ago, these guys were considered critically endangered because there was only about 200 individuals left in the wild. That is not a lot of individuals. And so zoos and aquariums and captive breeding got to step in and actually really help these guys. So animals like Pinky and Sage, who were living in managed care, they had babies, and those babies were taken care of in a special way that would allow them to be released into the wild, into the habitats where the golden lion tamarins lived. And because of that kind of program, we now see that their population is over 3,000 individuals. And that would not have happened if it weren't for animals in managed care, if it weren't for places like zoos who can help these animals out. So Pinky and Sage are a good example of what we can do to help as people and as a zoo to help protect these animals who unfortunately are sometimes losing their habitat. Habitat is a home for an animal. So these guys live in the forests. And sometimes people will chop down the forests so that they can clear the space to make farms or harvest the lumber. But unfortunately, that really affects these wonderful little critters. So we can do our part by sharing our space well and using less resources. So if you guys ever like to recycle, right? Recycling's super easy. If you use a piece of paper, rather than throwing it in the trash can, throw it in the recycle bin so we can reuse that and take less resources and hopefully have less of an impact on our planet and on the habitats that these animals call home. So Pinky and Sage, they are pretty cute. They're a little weary of my tripod right now. I have my camera on a tripod and they're not used to seeing that. So they're taking a little step back and making sure that everything's nice and safe for them. All right, I see we have some questions in the chat. So as I walk to our next space, Misty, if you want to let me know some of those questions.
Yes. One of the first one is, what makes their fur gold?
What makes their fur gold? That's a good question. I think that's just the color of their hair. It has to do with the melanin. So just like our hair gets that color, and we people have all sorts of different color hair. Same thing for most mammals. So some animals, they do get color from like the things they eat. So think about flamingos. Flamingos' feathers are actually pink because of their food. But some animals, it has more to do with just their genetics and what their hair color is supposed to be.
Okay, next, two-parter. What is your favorite animal to work with? And do you guys ever act like the animals are your pets?
Oh, that is such a good question. I love that you asked that. So my favorite animals to work with, I'm an educator, so I don't take care of the animals every day. I do work with a few different animals that are considered education animals. So my favorite one to work with is our education tawny frogmouth, which is a type of bird. His name is Hagrid. So I get to feed him and train him. So he is really fun to work with. They call him a frogmouth because they have really big beaks that open super wide. So he is so fun, and I love working with him and training with him. And do we act like they're our pets? That is such a good question. I love that you asked that. these guys are not our pets. So animals in zoos, wild animals like the golden lion tamarins or the seals, they aren't our pets because they're not considered domesticated. So think about a cat or a dog. There's been lots and lots of years where cats and dogs have been considered domesticated, where they're no longer wild animals and they behave very different from wild animals. So my kitty cat at home will come up and rub my legs, and she knows that I'm a safe person to be around it. And she has those behaviors because a long lineage, well, a long history of us taking cats and picking out the nicest cat and making sure that they're comfortable around people. So animals at zoos or wild animals are different than that. They don't have that long history. They are wild. So even though they're at the zoo, and even though their parents were at a zoo, they still have a lot of those innate behaviors. They're not considered domesticated. And so they don't like things like petting or touching. That can make them usually feel very nervous or scared. And we still have to respect their space and make sure that if they're feeling scared or nervous, that we back off just like you would a wild animal. And even though we work with them a lot and we can get them really comfortable with us, they're not our pets. They're just a little bit different than pets because they are still considered wild animals. So hopefully that helps answer your question. They're still amazing to work with, but it just looks a little bit different than taking care of a pet. All right, I'll take one more question and then we are at our next destination.
Our next question is, how long have you worked there?
I started working here in 2017 and I started as an intern. So I started as an intern and then I was part-time staff and then on full-time. So since roughly the summer of 2017. All right, we are at our next animal. So I want to make sure that we're seeing them while they're doing some cool stuff. So here are my seal friends. I see Sammy, and I believe that's Piper over there. Sammy's going to be swimming right in front of us here. Sammy is our youngest seal. She just turned 2 this month, and so she's a lot smaller than the other two. And then we have 2 boys, Piper and Sparky. So I believe that's Piper right there swimming around. These guys are a little bit tricky for me to tell who's who because I don't work with them every day. It's kind of like when you have friends who are twins. When you first meet those friends, you might be like, oh, I can't tell who's who. But then once you get to know them, you're like, oh, it's so obvious who's who because you know their personality, you know those small little details. Same thing for working with animals. So since I don't work with these guys every day, Piper and Sparky are a little bit trickier for me to tell apart. But their keepers definitely know them based on their behavior. So you can see them swim around in their pool. These guys are very aquatic. So they spend most of their time swimming in their pool. And you can see their bodies are built for it. Look at how they swim. Sammy here, she's like a little torpedo, right? Her body shape is perfect for moving through the water. They have flippers and fins instead of feet. So you don't see individual toes. You see that webbing on their back feet and their front feet. And that helps them move through the water very efficiently. So these guys spend most of their time hanging out in the water, but they are mammals. So they do breathe air. So they need to come up to take breaths of air. They do have fur. They do give live birth, all the things that mammals tend to do. So you can see our seals, they're just swimming so efficiently because they're built for hanging out in the water. And in the wild, they like to eat fish, right? So they need to swim really well to be able to catch fish. So they can swim very, very fast. And they're really good at being able to hunt their food, which tends to be schools of lots of different types of fish. And you can see kind of well here, we might be able to see once we get a little closer that they have those whiskers on their faces. Those whiskers help detect movement in the water. So as the fish swim around, the seals are able to tell which direction those fish are going to go and be able to try to gobble them up before that fish moves. Oh, you might be able to hear my friend Buckbeak. He is our sandhill crane who lives in an enclosure kind of behind me. And he loves to call, especially at trucks. So I think there's a truck going by. He always alerts us what's happening with the trucks at the zoo. All right. These guys are so fun.
Courtney, I have some questions about the seals.
Yeah, absolutely.
First question, how long can the seals hold their breath?
Oh, that's a great question. They can hold their breath for over a half hour, which sounds crazy to us. I know that we cannot do that, right? I can maybe hold my breath for 10 seconds. But their bodies are built for diving underwater, so they can hold their breath underwater for about a half hour, and they can even take a nap underwater while holding their breath. Isn't that amazing? All right, I'll take one more question about my seal friends, and then we will move on to our next spot.
How do seals swim underwater upside down?
They can swim upside down pretty well, right? You can see that's what Piper likes to do. He's probably going to do it again. They are very agile in the water because they need to be able to get their food, which is fish. So they can move and maneuver their body all around. And water is really unique because we think in like a 2D space. So I can kind of go forward or backward, but I can't really go up or down when I'm walking around, right? Unless I'm going down the stairs. But when they're in the water, they have all of those choices to go up, down, sideways, all sorts of different spaces. So they need to be able to move really efficiently in all of that space to catch their food and to avoid predators. So yeah, they can even swim upside down, as you can see Piper doing pretty well right there. Very efficient at swimming upside down and right side up. All right. I can take one more question as we walk to our behind the scenes space. We're taking a staff only trail here.
Let's see. I have two questions you might be able to answer pretty quickly. Do the seals ever come out of the water, and can you pet the seals?
Good questions. So the seals do come out of the water. They will hang out on land for a little bit. They tend to hang out just kind of like beached near the water, but they're always hanging out near the water. And they don't have a lot of space in their enclosure where they would be hanging out of the water because that wouldn't really be part of their natural habitat. They wouldn't be like hanging out in a field or anything like that. So if they want to, yeah, there is a nice shallow spot that we'll be able to see in a little bit where they can come hang out of the water. But for the most part, they do hang out in their pools or in their behind the scenes pools, which we will also get to see in a little bit. And what was the other question?
The other question was, can we pet the seals?
Oh, good question. We don't really pet the seals. Again, they're wild animals. So if you think about a wild animal in the wild, if another species were to touch them, that usually means that that other animal is trying to eat them. That's usually not a good thing to be touched by another species. So think of a little mouse. If they were getting touched by another animal, it's probably because of something trying to eat that mouse. Or if you were a seal, that other animal was trying to be next to that seal, it means something was trying to eat them. So generally touch is a really hard barrier to work through with wild animals. Now we do touch them to help take care of them. So it's not really petting like, oh, you're so cute, and that's something they like. Something they kind of just tolerate. Doesn't make them feel scared or nervous, but something that we've worked through with them. And we pet down their sides to make sure that their skin doesn't have any scrapes or bumps or anything like that, and make sure that they're really healthy. But they don't like to get like stroked and pet. That's not something that would feel very comfortable for them, and something that probably wouldn't be very safe for our keepers to do. Good question. All right, we are now behind the scenes again, and I wanted to show you a few things back here. So the first thing we're going to look at is the freezer where we keep all of the food. So let's open up this gigantic freezer and take a peek inside. And you can see boxes and boxes and boxes of fish. That is what it's in all of these boxes. Herring and capelin and smelt. So a lot of our fish gets sorted here and then gets thawed out over time to feed our seals as well as some other animals here at the zoo. You can see those purple and white bags right there. That is actually bear chow. So just like how there's cat food and dog food, there is actually bear food. So that's made by a company called Missouri. They are nutritional scientists for zoos. And so those zoo scientists, they figure out what the nutrients the animals need to make sure that they're really healthy. And so we offer our bears and all sorts of different animals this kind of pelleted form of food to cover a lot of their micro and macro nutritional needs. So everything that makes them feel really healthy. So just like when you sometimes eat a bowl of cereal and it's fortified, so it has all that iron, or maybe you might take a vitamin every day. That's kind of what this food is for our animals. It covers a lot of those nutritional needs that they have. But they get a lot of other things other than just the bear chow or whatever chow that animal might have. And our seals, they do not get a chow form of food. They just get fish because that's what they eat in the wild, and that covers all of their nutritional needs. Sometimes we'll put some different things on their fish, might sprinkle on the little extra stuff to cover some of those things that they need. But for the most part, that fish covers everything they need. And then you can see there's some popsicles in here. So these are bear popsicles. Those are special treats for our bears. That's what we call enrichment. So enrichment is a zoo word that means something novel or exciting for an animal to interact with. And so our bears love treats. They love having special treats. So We actually made these on a behind the scenes tour here at the zoo. And these treats have sweet potato and apple in them. Some of them have honey. Some of them have blood. And those are things that the bears really enjoy. And they're frozen, so it makes it really hard for them to eat it. So they spend a long time looking at these popsicles, playing with them in the pool, having all sorts of fun. So those popsicles are a great form of enrichment for our animals. And if you are interested in making them, you could join us on a Be a Zookeeper behind the scenes tour here at the zoo. And you can actually make those special treats. But we give them a form of enrichment every single day. And we will see the seals enrichment shelf in just a minute when we go in the seal kitchen. But next, we're going to take a look at our pump room. So this is where we clean all of the water for the animals and make sure it's really healthy for them. It's a little loud in here, so I'm going to stay nice and close to the camera so that you guys can hear me. So this is pretty behind the scenes. Most people don't get to see this spot. And it's kind of something you don't really think about at the zoo, is how do you clean all that water and make sure it's safe? So that seal pool that we were watching, Sammy and Piper in, that pool has 570,000 gallons of water in it. That's a lot of water. And we need to make sure it's really clean for them, because if it's not clean, if it has too much particulates or too many chemicals in it, that can actually make our seals really sick. So we need to ensure that their pool is perfectly clean for them. So we have a lot of equipment in this room right here that helps keep everything clean. So the first step in our filtration process is we actually have water softener. So you can see the water softener salt and the water softeners right there. You probably have one of these in your home, especially if you live in Madison, because Madison is really hard water. So this softens the water so that the calcium doesn't build up in our filters. That would actually destroy the filters. So it's very important that we have soft water. So we have all this water softener salt. And then this palette right here, that is more salt, but a different type of salt. So harbor seals are native to both the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, but they live in the ocean water, which is salty. Now seals, again, they're not fish, they're mammals. They breathe air. So they don't need the salt water to survive. They can live in fresh water just fine. But it's good for them to have the option to go into salt water. It's good for their eyes and it's good for their skin. So our behind the scenes pools have salt in them. And so that's where we get this, we have big pallets of salt and our little indoor pools always are salt water. So the seals always have access to those behind the scenes pools. So whenever they would like to, they can go into those salty pools. But our very, very large pool is not salt water, it's fresh water. And again, they don't need the salt water to survive. It's just something that we want to give them the option to have. All right. Now, there's two types of filtration that happens in this room: chemical and physical filtration. So up here, that is our ozone filtration system. So that is our chemical filtration. So ozone is a chemical that is O3, so 3 oxygen atoms together. And ozone occurs naturally in nature when lightning strikes. So we actually create ozone in this room by having really high pressure air and high voltage electricity, and that creates ozone. And when the ozone chemical mixes with water, it breaks apart and it breaks into O2, which is just an oxygen molecule, the same thing that's in the atmosphere and in the air all over the place. And then there's a roaming oxygen atom. And so that oxygen needs to bind with something else. So that oxygen will bind with other chemicals that we don't want in our water, like nitrates and phosphates, things that naturally occur when the animals go to the bathroom in the water. And when we have too much of those chemicals, that's usually what causes big algal blooms. So when the water looks really green and not so good, that's because of that buildup of those chemicals. So the ozone helps filter out those chemicals, and it's a more natural way for us to purify our water and keep it very clean and chemically filter our water. So we can use things like chlorine as well, but that tends to be a little bit harsh on our animals' skin and eyes. So this ozone filtration system is a much better, more natural way for us to filter out those chemicals and keep it really safe for our animals who live in the water. And then our other type of filtration is our physical filtration. So these are giant filters. Think about it like a big net catching all of the debris, even the teeny tiny little bits of debris in the water. So this one is for our seal pool, and that one there's for our polar bear pool. Inside them, they have sand or glass that catches all of the dirt, all of the debris, and filters it through. So that way, it catches all of that stuff and it's physically filtering the water. So our pools are in a closed system. So we're not constantly putting water into the pool. Instead, the water is filtering through these both types of filters and getting clean and then going back into the pool. So we don't have to waste so much water. So that's a great way for us to be sustainable and a great way for us to use less water and use less energy by having a very efficient filtration system. So this area is pretty cool. Not a lot of people get to see this part. And again, not a lot of people think about this part as a zoo, is that there is a lot of engineering and technology that goes into making sure that our enclosures are safe and healthy for all of our animals. So it's pretty cool to see this behind the scenes spot. And then for those of you who might be interested in working with animals, but maybe you want to do more engineering, maybe you want to use more of that part of your brain, you can still do that here at a zoo by working on our maintenance team. They work with their hands all the time and they help maintain all of this awesome equipment to keep our animals really healthy and really safe. So a lot of different roles here at the zoo. All right.
Courtney, I have a quick question. How do you know if the water is safe for the animals?
That is such a good question. So we do a lot of testing every single day. So we're actually going to hop into the Steel Kitchen quick, and I'll show you some of those tests that we do to make sure that it's safe for our animals. But yeah, we have to test the water every day to make sure that it's hitting all the benchmarks of what we want to see for our water for a couple different parameters, a couple different things that we test for. Any other questions?
Another question is, where does the dirty water go? I think you kind of covered that, but.
Yeah, that's a good question. So our filter slowly catches up all of that dirt and all that particulate, and eventually it gets kind of clogged. So if you think about like a net skimming the water, eventually that net's not going to be very efficient. So what we do is we call it back flushing. So we do this about once a week, sometimes more, where we flush the water the opposite way through the filter. So just like if you were skimming on a net and you flipped it the other way, all of that particulate would come out, right? That's the same thing we do for our filter. So then there's some big tanks back there. It kind of fills up those big tanks and slowly gets flushed down, just like when you flush a toilet, gets flushed down into the sewage system and gets cleaned out. So that's where all of that dirt and debris go. Good question. All right, any other quick questions, or should we move on to our Seal Kitchen?
I think we can move on.
Awesome. Give me just a moment as I switch my camera around here. See our Seal Kitchen. I got to use my zookeeper keys. It's an important part of working at a zoo is having your keys always ready to go, unlocking everything behind you. Right. So here we are in our Seal Kitchen. So there's a lot of different things going on in here. Again, this is a really behind the scenes spot. Most people don't get to be able to see this. So this is where our keepers work to do all the daily prep and all the different things they need to help take care of the seals. So the first thing I wanted to point out to you was our enrichment shelf. So again, enrichment is that zoo word that means anything novel, unique, or exciting for an animal to interact with. So sometimes, like we saw in the freezer, that means special treats. But for our seals, they really mostly eat fish, and they're honestly not too fond of a lot of special treats. So we have to find other ways to stimulate their brains, to keep them really active and interested in what's going on. So we have lots of different things on this shelf. We have some buoys, so you can see these buoys right here. These will float in the water, and it's just something different for them to have in their environment. We also have this really fun fire hose toy. So again, this floats in the water, and it kind of looks like a giant jellyfish. And it's made out of fire hose. So you'll see fire hose in a lot of different enrichment at our zoo because fire hose is really durable. And we usually use recycled fire hose. So it's a great way for us to reduce, reuse, and recycle, right? So reusing something is a great way to give it another life so we don't have to throw it in the landfill. So we take a lot of expired fire hose And we'll turn that into so many different things at the zoo. So if you've been to our zoo before, or the next time you might visit our zoo, be sure to take a look around at our exhibits and see if you can find any fire hose, because I bet you will be able to find some in most of our animal enclosures, because it's something we use quite a lot of. It's very, very durable, and it doesn't shred the same way some other fiber will that could be actually potentially hazardous to our animals. So fire hose is something we use quite a lot of, and you can see it here in this fun seal toy right here. Lots of little things that float. Now, a fun thing about our seals is that the seals are kind of big, scaredy seals. They don't love a lot of new things. So being in or having a brand new scary thing in their enclosure can actually be a little bit overwhelming. So we tend to keep their enrichment items a little bit simpler, because they don't love to have a bunch of moving things or a bunch of flashy toys or things like that, because that'd be very enriching for them. It'd actually be kind of scary. Another enrichment item you can see here, we have some little windmills. So we'll put this around their enclosure, and it just moves and spins. So it's something that's just kind of fun and visually stimulating for them, so that they can see something different. So with enrichment, we want to think about their visual, so what they're looking at. So a lot of this is very visual. We want to think about what they're hearing. So sometimes we actually have sound machines in a lot of different spaces in our zoo, and that'll play sounds like cricket sounds or wave sounds, just different sounds that they don't hear every day. So, or they can sometimes even listen to the radio, and that's on inside. And so that's stimulating them with their hearing. We'll stimulate them with their taste. We'll give them different treats. And our seals don't love a lot of different treats, but we'll still offer them some fun things every now and again. And we'll stimulate them with smell too. A little trickier with our seals, but with a lot of our animals in the zoo, a lot of them have really excellent sense of smell. So we'll do different fun things, like finding different treats or different unique things. So Keeper Christian here actually has something fun for us.
So this is some Jello that we made yesterday, and it's going to be given tomorrow. So it needs to set for about 48 hours. We actually, because we defrost our fish here, it comes to us frozen and we defrost it. Some of the blood drains out while it's defrosting. So we use the fish blood and gelatin to make this delicious Jello for them. And they're going to get this tomorrow as a really fun extra treat.
Yum, delicious. How many of you guys would like some blood Jello? Yum. I can't wait for them to have that. That'll be so fun. But yeah, we have to think of a lot of creative different ways for us to enrich our animals and think of new things that would be fun and exciting for them. So another fun thing we'll do sometimes with some of our different animals is our animals will, shed fur or shed their feathers, and we'll give that to a different animal. So we have our camels and our bison are really shedding right now because it's getting really hot and they're shedding their winter coat. And so we'll freeze that to kill off any bacteria or any bad stuff. And then we will give that to a different type of animal so they can smell that and have a fun new thing to smell and touch and taste. All sorts of really stimulating enrichment. So enrichment's a really unique thing that we do here at the zoo that we have to think about every single day of how can we continue to enrich our animals and give them something new, something different, and something exciting.
Hey, Courtney, I have a question.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Do you know what the seal's favorite toy is?
Ooh, I don't, but I bet Keeper Kristen would.
One of their favorite toys right now is actually this jellyfish thing. So it's on a really big ball. So the ball floats and this hangs in the water, and the fire hose strips kind of spread out all over the place, and they can swim in it and pull it around. So I think that's one of their favorites. The other favorite is actually in one of the indoor pools right now. It's a mirrored toy, and our young seal, Sammy, loves to chase the reflected light. So she'll push the toy, and it shines the light on the edge of the pool, and she'll go and swim around and chase the light while the toy kind of rolls around on the bottom of the pool. It's definitely one of her favorites. We need to get a second one because she loves it so much.
Oh, that's so fun. Does anyone ever have a cat or a dog that likes to play with a laser pointer? I feel like that's pretty adjacent. So Kristen, we had a question earlier about how do we know if the water is safe for the seals?
We do so much water testing here. So this cabinet is a little messy, but I can show you all of the things that we use for our water testing. So we have all sorts of different ways that we do our testing. We drop different drops into the water for different things. Look at color levels that tell us what the levels of things are at. And we're able to test all sorts of stuff that way. If you hold on right there, we're going to grab this sheet of paper. So this sheet of paper is where we track all of our testing that we do every day. So we check for the pH, which is just the level of acidity in the pool. We check for chlorine, we check for ammonia, we check for nitrogen, nitrates and nitrites, and all sorts of different things that if any of those are high, then we know that there's something going on with the pool. And we have a group of maintenance guys who are in charge of helping us fix things when there's something wrong with the pool. So we'll do all of our testing every day, and then we let them know if there's anything that's off, and then they take care of it from there. So we check all sorts of stuff on their pools all of the time.
Absolutely.
So we're waiting on our second seal trainer to come down. Our zoo manager, Joanna, will be joining us to help feed the seals this morning. And she is on her way. But while we're waiting for her, I thought that I could tell you a little bit about what our training is, what our tools are that you'll see us bring outside, and kind of give you a little bit of a starting point. So that when you see us train them, you'll know a little bit about what we're doing. So the main thing you're going to see us use is this blue and white buoy on a stick. We call this a target stick. And a target stick is something that is used all across the zoo. You can target pretty much any animal. I've trained bearded dragons to target, and tortoises, and bears, and seals, and cats, and primates, my dog at home. So pretty much any animal can be trained to target. And what we want them to do is just to poop their nose to this blue and white buoy. And that's super simple, and it sounds like a kind of silly behavior, but it's really our way of saying, hey, come over to where I'm at and come participate with me. So they know their blue and white buoy on the stick. You're going to meet our seals. We have 3. Piper is hanging out inside. We'll see him briefly when we go outside to train Sammy and Sparky. Sammy is our 2-year-old female, so she's pretty little. Sparky is our 23-year-old guy, and he has cataracts, so he can't see quite as well. So you'll also notice that this target stick has a rattle. Because Sparky can't really see the target stick as well, we want to make sure that he can hear where the target stick is. And as his seeing starts to get a little bit worse as he ages, his sense of hearing has really gotten better. So we like to rattle this, and then he knows exactly where to go. So like I said, we use that to ask them to come out of the water, go to specific spots in the water, come to where we are, shift inside. We really use the target sticks for a lot of things. You'll also see we have a clicker, sounds like that. And that's how the animal knows that they've done the thing that we wanted them to do. We call that a bridge in animal training, but basically it's just their way of hearing that they've done exactly what they need to do and their fish is coming. Because sometimes it takes us a minute to reach into the bucket, toss the fish, and get it into their mouth, that they'll maybe have changed what they're doing by then, or they'll have rolled away from us or done something different. We want to make sure that we're reinforcing that exact behavior that we asked them for. So that click really lets us hone in on our training and make sure that they know exactly what we're asking them to do. And then we're super clear with what we're telling them, and they know what to expect. So we have 2 different types of fish that we feed them here. This one is called capelin. It's a little bit of a smaller fish, a little bit less fatty. We tend to feed more of this in the summer because it's less fatty and they don't need to have as much blubber on them in the summertime. And then we also have their herring, which is the bigger fish. That is a little bit fattier. So going into like the winter months, they'll eat a little bit more herring to get ready for winter. Our seals tend to choose to stay outside the majority of the winter. So even though they'll have the option to come in, like you'll see our indoor pools and Piper likes to hang out inside, they get the choice to do whatever they want. So we pretty much always let them have the choice of being inside or outside at all times. Right now, Piper is really in a mood to hang out in his indoor pool, but the other 2 tend to like to be outside. You also see we have this purple ring, which this is just kind of a fun behavior that we like to train them. All 3 of our seals will retrieve this. We can toss it in the pool, they'll go get it and push it back over to us. It's something that makes them think a little differently during their training. Just like all of the toys are really great enrichment, their training session is also a really enriching part of their day. But it's also important just to keep their minds active. It's like when we go home and read or do puzzles or do something that makes us think a little bit harder at the end of the day. Same kind of thing for them. The training makes them just think a little bit more about what they're doing. Since our animals that live here at the zoo don't have to worry about predators or finding their food or negotiating somewhere safe to sleep, we like to make them think a little bit more during their training sessions. So we do things that are just fun, like the retrieval, or Piper likes to go out onto the island that you'll see in our pool. But a lot of the things we train are things that help us take care of them. So things like coming up on deck, letting us touch them, giving us their flippers so that we can check their claws, opening their mouth so we can do a nice check of their teeth, make sure their teeth all look good, holding still so that we can do eye drops, because as they get older, they may need, like Sparky has his cataracts, so he may need eye drops as he gets a little bit older. So having that as a trained behavior that he voluntarily comes up and participates in is super important for us. But also shifting inside, getting on their scale, and letting us do voluntary injections. So if they ever needed any vaccines or any medications, they'll come up on deck and we can give them a shot in their hip if they needed it.
Awesome.
Do you guys have any? That was a lot of information all at once. Do you guys have any questions about any of that?
Yes, they do. Can seals see color?
I don't fully know the answer. I know they can see some color, but I don't know exactly what their spectrum of color is.
Good question.
They can't see quite the same that we see.
Another question we have is, how many pounds of fish does a seal eat in a day?
Right now, so actually a little cheat sheet up here that tells me exactly who's getting what. So Sammy is getting 5 pounds of fish a day, Sparky is getting 6.5, and Piper is getting 7 pounds. And we split it between those 2 different types of fish. I'm sorry, that was a radio call from me, so I'm just gonna.
So we split it between those 2 different types of fish to make sure, again, like Kristen was saying, that there's not too much fat content, and that we make sure that we're keeping them really healthy with the 2 different types of fish, because each fish has different types of nutrients in it. So each day they make sure that they're getting the right amount of food, and then they use that scale right there. They hang up that bucket on the scale and weigh out that fish to make sure they're getting everything that they need.
I can show you, we defrost our fish here in our fridge. So we have bear meat up here, bear fish here, and then seal fish defrosting down here. So this is what I'll use to prep their buckets for tomorrow. And then we pull more fish out of the big freezer
That was
outside. Did you guys get to look at the freezer?
Sure did. Got to see all those fish in there. So you can see it's kind of a slow process of us getting all of that fish ready and prepped so that our seals have everything that they need.
It takes about 3 days for our fish to defrost. So we have it on kind of a rotating system where we can make sure we always have defrosted fish ready to go for everyone.
Yes. Can we talk about how we would weigh the seals?
Yeah. So I have a scale. It's really echoey in here. I'm sorry. We have this big scale that is sitting up on a shelf right now, so that it's not on the ground or to get wet. But we move it onto the ground, actually right over here. And we have this little shift door here that goes to the indoor pool over here that Piper is hanging out in. And we'll ask the seal to come out to this space, and then they can hop up onto the scale. We can get a quick weight on it that way.
And why is it important to get a weight?
The weight is super important for us. With a lot of animals, the first way that you know that they might not be feeling good is if their weight changes and you don't expect it. So we want to keep a good eye on their weight. We also want to make sure that they're losing and gaining weight appropriately for the season. So we expect harbor seals to gain weight going into the winter because they need to add a little bit of fat to their bodies for the cold temperatures, and we expect them to lose a little bit of weight going into the summer. So along with making sure we're giving them the right diet, the weights help us know that they're kind of trending in the right direction for those things.
Awesome. All right. Well, you get ready for the seal training. I'll talk a little bit about this space in here. So this is kind of their behind the scenes space. So this essentially acts as their bedroom. So just like how you guys probably don't want to be around people all the time, you might want to have a little bit of a break. We always give our animals access or a choice to go back to a behind the scenes place where they might not be able to see people. So you can see that Piper is making that choice today where he just wants to hang out back behind the scenes. And we love that he's able to make that choice because it means that he can feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit healthier. Just like how, we kind of want to have those breaks some days too. So this is our first indoor pool, and you can see there's enrichment back here. So he has a fun little ball he can play with. There is the space for them to be able to walk out onto exhibit. And then this is another indoor pool you can see right here. And there you can see the door that goes onto exhibit. So they're separated. So, if say they didn't want to be together, they wanted to go a separate space away from the other one. Again, they have that choice where they can kind of move around however they would like to move. And you can see these doors, they go up and down through a pulley system that's right here. So you can see it moves up and down. So we don't have to go in with the seals to ask them to come in and close the door behind them. We do what we call shifting. So we'll ask them to go to a different space if we need to, and then we can close the door behind them. So if we needed to go clean the pool or do something like that where it wouldn't be safe for them to be outside, we can close the door and have them in this space so we can keep a closer eye on them and keep them nice and safe.
So Courtney, I'm going to have you guys go over with Sammy for a minute, watch a little bit of targeting with her, and then come back over to me and start.
Wonderful. beautiful. So this is what you've probably seen before as visiting the Henry Vilas Zoo. And here's that shallow space I was talking about before. So this is where they can kind of come on land. They're still going to be pretty close to water the whole time. But this is where if they want to be in a shallower space and not actively swimming, this is where they can go. So there we see that target behavior. So every time the Sammy does that behavior, does the thing that we want, you'll hear Joanna make a clicker sound. And that clicker lets her know, yes, I did the thing she wanted me to do. And now I know that a treat is coming. And that treat she's getting is that fish that keeper Kristen just showed us. So we do a lot of their feeding through training. So they're always working, always stimulating their brains, always working on those behaviors that help us take really good care of them. So you can see we can really get Sammy to move around her enclosure just by doing that really simple target behavior. We can ask her to do a couple different things, but get up nice and close. And you see that she's not scared or nervous. And again, we're not forcing her to do this. If she wants to swim away, she totally can. That's her choice. But she knows that if she comes over here, she gets that fish that she really, really likes. And it's something that's really awesome for her. And you can see that they're a little bit awkward on land. They're very, very efficient swimmers, but their kind of plump little bodies don't move too well on land. So it makes it harder for them to walk around on land, but very, very efficient in the water. Good job, Sammy. She did a great job. She got all of those targeting behaviors that are again, something that really helps us take care of the seals here at the zoo. And here we can see, this is Sparky. He's bringing back that ring toy to Kristen. And again, that's a retrieval behavior, a little less practical for us, but a little more fun for the seals. And she's asked him to spin. That spinning behavior helps us see their whole body. So as they move around, it helps us see, you know, if we needed to look at one part of them, it allows us to take a whole look at their whole body. And you can hear that rattle. And that helps him again, like Kristen said, he has those cataracts, a little harder for him to see, but he can hear really well. She's checking on his teeth right there. So she asked him to hold, so hold still, and then open his mouth so we can look at his teeth. She's checking on his flipper. So that way we could touch his flipper if maybe he had a nail that was broken or a cut or a scratch. Getting him really comfortable with us touching that part of his body would make him feel safer and be really good for us as we take care of him if that were to ever happen. And there's that touch behavior. And again, you can see she's not really petting him like he's her pet. Instead, she was checking and feeling his skin, making sure there's no scratches, no bumps. And then there was that poke behavior. So she said poke, and he knew that that means I'm going to get a little poke. And that helps us practice if you were to get a shot or a vaccine. And that open behavior. And now she's asking him to go swim. Go back into the water. There's that spin behavior again. Let us see his whole body. And then she lets him know when he's all done, so he knows he's not expecting any more treats and that he did a really good job earning all of that fish with those behaviors that we asked. So how was that training session? Did you do good?
We're gonna stand over there so we can let Joanna go by. Right now. Great. Okay. And I'm also just gonna rinse the fish scales off of my hands while we're here.
Part of being a zookeeper, right? It's having fish scales all over your hands.
So it was a great session. They were super motivated. They came up. They seemed really interested in what we were asking them to do. We kind of based their training session based off of their motivation level. So if they seem like they're not really interested in training that day, we still want to make sure they have a fun session with us because their training is a lot of how we build our relationships with them. So even if they don't seem super interested in training, we might not ask for hard things like open or coming out of the water. We might just ask them to target around and do some spins because those are easy, fun things that they like to do. And then we just do a really high rate of reward. So lots and lots of fish, even if they're just targeting and kind of moving around a little bit, they get lots and lots of treats for doing that because we want them to have a really fun time hanging out with us so that when they're feeling a little more motivated, we can ask them for some of those harder behaviors, like that open mouth that Sparky did. That took a long time for us to kind of, we call it shaping the behavior. So slowly getting him to different steps of that until finally he's holding his mouth nice and wide open where a vet can come over and take a picture of his mouth and send it to the dentist, the veterinary dentist, and say, hey, what do you think about his teeth? Because he's not a young guy, so gotta make sure his teeth look nice and healthy all the time.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Kristen. All right, next what we're gonna do is we're gonna have our chance for questions. So I will be answering any questions that you guys have. So we take our last 5 minutes and answer any questions.
Okay, I'm gonna start at the top here. We got this a couple times. Is the playground open?
The playground is open at the zoo.
Let's see. We have our next question is, why are cheetahs so fast?
Oh, good question. Usually an animal's adaptations, or the things that they're doing, are to help them survive. So cheetahs need to eat, they usually eat gazelle and animals that move really fast. So to be able to catch their food, they need to run really fast. So that's why they run really fast, to be able to catch their food. So the faster they run, the more likely they are to catch their food, because the more likely they are to survive and have babies. And then those babies are really fast, and it all kind of builds up from there.
Okay, our next question is another one about the facility. When will the bird and primate buildings be open?
Our primate building is open right now. Our aviary is going to take a little bit longer. Animals can be susceptible to COVID. So our primates, our bats, and a couple different animals in the aviary can catch COVID. So we need to be really careful, especially because they're endangered animals. And the filtration system in the air for that building is just a little bit trickier. So we're not quite able to open that one yet, but you can come check out our primate house. And probably later this month, our herpetarium will also be open.
Okay, next, where do the disabled animals live?
Oh, good question. Generally, they continue to live in their enclosures as long as it's safe for them to do so. So like she was saying, Sparky is really, really old. So he can't see very well, but he still lives in this enclosure. We just have to make some modifications to make sure it's safe for him. So he's used to being in this pool. So if we actually put him in a different pool, he might get a little disoriented and not feel very safe and not do so well. So keeping him in this pool where he knows the lay of the land is a way that we can help him out. And same thing for our other animals. They're generally going to stay in their enclosures. We might just, if maybe they have a hurt foot or can't move around so well, we'll make a ramp instead of a staircase. There's simple modifications that would make it easier for those animals to move around their enclosures.
On seals, how high can seals jump out of the water?
Oh, good question. They generally really don't jump out of the water too much. So for the most part, their food is in the water and swimming. So they really wouldn't have a reason to launch out of the water, because that would actually make them pretty vulnerable. So I'm not sure how high they could jump, but it's not usually a natural behavior that you would see from a seal.
And here's a personal question. Do you love your job?
Oh, I love my job so much. It is so fun. I get to work with animals every day and teach awesome kiddos like you guys. So yes, I do love my job.
Let's see. Oh, here's another one. How many seals? So we have 3 seals, and do you expect any baby seals?
We are not anticipating any baby seals at this time. Sammy's a little bit too young to be able to give birth. So we're not in any birth watches or anything like that for our seals. But generally, we participate in something called a species survival plan. So that looks at the genetic diversity of all the animals in all of the other AZA zoos and make sure that we have a really genetically diverse group of animals, especially for those endangered animals. So we want to make sure that we have a healthy population. So sometimes at our zoo, you'll see some animals move around. So like our polar bear, Nunic, he left to go to the Kansas City Zoo to be a part of that program so that maybe he could have some offspring and they could be a part of that plan. And then we got a new bear. So all of our animals are in a bigger plan than just what's happening here at the zoo. So there are lots of thoughts behind what if this animal has a baby, and lots of plans in place if that were to happen. So right now we're not anticipating that happening at the seal pool. We have 2 males and just 1 female, and our female's too young to have babies. So we won't have babies anytime soon.
Our next question is, do you have hippos there?
We do not have any hippos at our zoo. They are really fun animals, though. If you head to the Milwaukee Zoo, which is also an AZA zoo, they just got a really awesome hippo enclosure. So be sure to check that out.
How do you name your animals?
That's such a good question. It really depends. So sometimes our animals come with names. So Sammy the seal, she came from Anchorage Zoo, and her keepers named her there when she was born. I named her Sammy after the old founder of the old director of the zoo there. So sometimes they're named after people. Like our rhino Harmon was named after a person who did a lot of great work for rhino conservation. And sometimes they come with their names, and sometimes our keepers get to name them. And it's kind of just depends. Sometimes they have silly names. Our camel's name is Bug, which is short for booger, because he's a little booger. So sometimes it's silly. Sometimes there's a little bit more purpose behind it. It really just depends on the animal and the story behind it.
Another question. When will you be getting new animals?
That's a good question. Again, it really has to do with that species survival plan. So if we get new individuals, it's usually all a part of that big plan. And as far as new animals and new exhibits, it just depends on if we can update our exhibits. Generally, you'll see new animals in places like our aviary, where we have multiple species, and it's a space that can handle a lot of different types of animals. So you might see some new species there. But some facilities or some enclosures, like our seal enclosure, this was built for harbor seals. So we're not going to get any different types of seals anytime soon. We want to plan for the whole life of our seals. So our seals are going to stay here, and we're not going to get any new seals anytime soon. So it just kind of depends on the enclosure and depends on what type of animal.
Let's see here. We have, what is the biggest and smallest animal at the zoo?
Good question. Our biggest animal is our giraffe, Eddie. And our, as far as height, I think for our weight, it would be our rhino Harmon. And then the smallest would probably be one of the little birds in the aviary. We have some saffron finches that are really little. We also have some invertebrates. So like our Madagascar hissing cockroaches, or our stick bugs. Those would probably qualify as the smallest. Or our poison dart frogs are also tiny.
And let's see. Have you ever had elephants at the zoo?
Historically, Henry Vilas Zoo did have elephants, but like I said before, we've been around since 1911. And as you can imagine, the zoo's changed a lot from then, and our ability to take care of animals has changed a lot. We have learned so much about what animals need and how we can take really good care of them. So we did historically have elephants, but AZ8 let us know that wasn't going to meet the standards anymore. And we want to make sure we're meeting those standards and taking good care of our animals. So back in the 90s, we stopped having elephants at our zoo because we couldn't provide all of the things that they need and meet that high standard of care. And with the current regulations, to have elephants at our zoo, we'd have to have a lot of different individuals, and we'd have to have a very large indoor space for them because it gets really cold here in Wisconsin. So we'd have a very large indoor space, very large outdoor space, multiple individuals, and collectively that would actually take up a third of our zoo if we were to have elephants at our zoo. So we likely are not going to have elephants back at the Henry Vilas Zoo just because we know that we wouldn't be able to provide the right amount of space for them. And we want to make sure we're taking the best possible care of our animals.
Okay, I think we have enough time for 2 more questions.
Good.
Have the primates been vaccinated against COVID-19?
That is such a good question. We have not vaccinated any of our animals, but we are on a list with our figuring out what that might look like for animals. So we don't know the answer to that yet because there hasn't been enough studies with wild animals. So we are learning alongside all of the other AZA zoos what that looks like to keep our animals healthy. So it's a potential possibility for our animals, but we don't know what that looks like quite yet.
And our last question for today, can you teach the big cats to do tricks?
Yeah. So again, they're not quite tricks. They're things that help us take really good care of them. But absolutely, our big cats are trained quite a bit. They can do a lot of the similar behaviors that you saw us do with our seals. We obviously don't share a space with our big cats. We do it through a barrier that keeps the keepers safe. So we'll do things like asking them for putting their side up against the fence, and we'll do a poke behavior so we can give them a vaccine. We can do blood draws from their tails, which is pretty wild and really awesome. And they are target trained, just like how you saw the seals do target training, and probably a lot more too. So yes, we do training with almost all of our animals here at the zoo.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Courtney. I hope all of you enjoyed your time with us today. Remember, you can always visit our Lakeside Kids page on the Monona Terrace website to see videos of past programs. We hope to see you next Wednesday, same time, same place for Lakeside Kids featuring MSCR's Fancy Feet and Pottery Treats. Bye for now. Thanks again, Courtney.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.